and I will have this recording in a YouTube link that I'll send out as soon as it's compiled. It takes a little bit of time once I record it and then send it to, do its magic behind the scenes and get it to where it's YouTube compatible. Then I'll be able to put it online so you guys can see it, come back to it, or if you've missed the class, you can actually pick it back up. Any questions, thoughts, comments there?
Yes, I have one question.
Go ahead.
Regarding the invite for this class when it is Zoom, will you be sending that out like you did this week, just right at the 1 o'clock?
Nope. I hope to have it. And this was my concern, is that we ran into a few Zoom connections in the previous classes. They assured me they had everything fixed, but I could not start the class this time. Usually it's the students that can't get in for some reason, but I could not start the class. Were you guys sitting in a Zoom room initially?
No.
You were never in the Zoom room?
No, we were not.
Okay. We did not get the link.
It should be in your curriculum, which I'll check on that too. It should be when you go into your week 2, like you're going into your e-learning, there should be a button that says Zoom or connect to Zoom.
Okay.
And if not, I'm wondering if it would be helpful to email a Zoom link again 10 minutes before class. That'll be on December 22nd.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. I'll make sure that's done. I'm hoping to have that fixed, but if not, I'll make sure the Zoom link is in front of you guys. Anybody else? Other questions? Okay, let's get started then. So this is our first virtual or electronic. And I'll take chats. I'll take just yelling things out. What makes a good meeting? What makes a good virtual meeting anyway?
Technology working.
Technology working. Boom. That'd be nice. An agenda. Nice. What else?
Everyone paying attention.
Nice. Contributing. Yep. What else?
I said that.
A purpose.
Purpose, right? Hopefully it's on the agenda, or at least has a good idea what's on the agenda. You have one up there already, being prepared, right? Myself, including you guys. Good start. Excellent. So absolutely, what makes a good meeting? Agenda, focus, me staying organized, making sure that we don't go down too many rabbit holes, right? You guys' participation with that, because this is not just one way. I'm going to ask your opinion on things. Being honest about the time ramifications, right? This isn't going to go till 4. I'm going to try to make sure that we cover the material. I'm going to cover it at a reasonable rate and pace, but want to make sure that we give you the breaks that we say we're going to give you and that type of thing. Hopefully you're taking good notes. Try to keep rabbit holes to a minimum, but I'll caveat that by saying if the rabbit holes are conducive to learning in the class, I'll let it go for a while. So if we're going to ask you for certain stories, especially those that have been working in the hospitality for any length of time, I think it's very important to share those types of stories so people in the class can get a context and can understand some of the content that we're going through. And then last but not least, try to keep your distractions to a minimum. If you can keep your microphone on mute and then unmute when you want to say something, that will help, because you got background noise, dogs barking, pans banging, and phones ringing. So if we can keep that distractions to a minimum, that'd be great. Is there anything out there that I missed? Okay. Quick review from last week. What did we take from last week? What did we go through?
Makes a great leader.
Absolutely. What makes a great leader, right? What are the characteristics? Anybody have some that we talked about last week?
Tenacious.
Tenacious. Love it. Who else? We'll take 2 or 3 more.
Loyal.
Loyal. Awesome. What else?
Trustworthy.
I'm sorry?
Kind.
Kind. One more.
Trustworthy.
Trustworthy. Excellent. Thank you so much. Servant attitude. Got it. Somebody in the chat said servant attitude. Excellent. Excellent job. Just want to check and see if I've got everybody logged in here, if anybody's still waiting. Let me see here. Doesn't look like it. Okay. Training's already talked about and that. So week 2, what are we going to cover? Today, creating a safe environment for your team. So we're going to talk about unconscious bias and also sexual harassment and what are some of the steps potentially that we could use to prevent that. Okay, so some of the learning objectives will be understanding that unconscious bias in hospitality, especially. What a manager's role is in creating a welcoming environment for all, and then the importance of creating that safe environment, and then last but not least, sexual harassment prevention in the hospitality industry. So number 1, goals of this particular area of the session to understand the role that unconscious bias plays in our workspace, both for employee and customer interactions. Certainly develop a way to greet guests specific to their role, whether you're server or front desk and those types of things. Recognize that we all have certain biases, and we'll talk about a few of those. And then awareness, fairness, creating the awareness and fairness is very important, as well as taking action and then debriefing on situations. How do we prevent sexual harassment in the workplace? How to handle it once it does happen? There's certain steps, and I want to make sure that we're going to give you a general one, but we want to make sure that that Hillsdale / Dow, all the organizations that are in the room, that you know what they are going forward. And then try to create that harassment-free culture, correcting behaviors. Any role that unconscious bias plays, and then as well as preventing sexual harassment, certainly creates that safe environment for both your customer and the employees. So let's get into understanding unconscious bias in hospitality. So do we understand what the biases that we have? And if we don't, we're going to be talking about it here in a second. And then we certainly want to the impact of that bias does at work. So first exercise, if you've got a sheet of paper or if you have something nearby that you can write on, what are 3 bullet points that you could name that you've run into as far as biases in the workplace? Write down 3 things that that you would share. Write 3 things that you think that kind of are that unconscious bias, and maybe, yeah, well, let's do it that way first, and then we'll come back and we'll kind of talk about what those are. So who wants to start? Throw one out there as far as a bias that you might have. So Adams throws out age. So age in the workplace.
Sex, gender,
Yeah.
race, you name it.
You got a lot of them out there, right?
Yeah, I got it.
So we've got age as the first one. So that could be one. And how would that bias, what would that look like? How could we be preventing something or offending somebody with an age bias? What do you think on that?
If they're older, saying that they can't, they're not able to lift something or do a specific job because they're older or.
Yeah. So in the workplace, right, that we might be biased because we feel that, oh, you know what, they're a little bit older, they can't do some of the things that a younger employee could do, and therefore maybe we wouldn't give them certain jobs. Maybe we would pass over them for potential promotion or rate increase because we don't feel that they can handle certain types of jobs, right? So certainly that could be one of them. Race could also be another one that's been shared. That certainly can come into play. Anybody have a situation where they've gotten into where that has become apparent? Not to this point. Okay, we'll come back to that. Gender. What situations or what examples do we have as far as gender?
John mentioned assuming that women can't lift something or women
Okay.
specifically can't do something.
Excellent. Any other that come to mind as far as gender bias? Okay. So I'm gonna flash a word on the screen and give you a few minutes to look at that, and then we're going to talk about the potential bias that you may or may not have. So if somebody comes into your facility and they have what I consider that they're from New York or have that type of vibe about them, what type of bias would we have towards somebody that has the New Yorker type attitude or characteristic? Nobody?
Aggressive.
That here's one in the a couple of them in the comments are that they are rude and pushy, that they are brash.
Yes.
Certainly being short comes to mind. If you've ever shaken hands with somebody from New York, they tend to turn their hand over a little bit so that they're in the more upright or dominant position. So they rotate it toward their left so that their hand is in the dominant position. But that's not everybody. That's just a bias for sure. Was there anything else? And I'll just say, Adam also said, I think in the kitchen there are a lot of times that women are put in easier tasks and not the harder tasks. Okay, so again, think about that. So if that's the case, that we have some bias about potentially somebody from New York or carries themselves that they're a little brash or they're rude, that type of thing, we might treat them differently. Okay, here's another one. Tell me what your thoughts are on somebody that has this characteristic. What stereotypes or what bias might we have in that situation?
Lazy.
Lazy, okay. They play a great Santa, nice. Can't do physical work, right? Whether that's either laziness or can't do it, okay? Because we're just assuming here. Not motivated, excellent. Sloppy, good. Okay, slow, excellent. That's good feedback. But again, does that creep into your own bias? Again, whether that's an employee or whether that's a patron at your hotel or any restaurants that you have. Okay, so again, think about these types of things and the quick judgments we make based on appearance and or in the New Yorkers case, the way they carry themselves. I got one last one for you. What type of stereotypes or characteristics of these type of people?
That they can't use an iPhone?
Right, technology might be a little bit of a trouble for them, right? Not mentally sharp. Already got the not good with technology. Anything else? Slow, can't learn new things, right? Stuck in their ways. Again, this is more the employee side, right? So again, we're making judgments all the time about that. And really what this class is about today is how can we get out of our own way? Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen just for a second, and then I'm going to read you just a little bit of a story, and I just want your feedback at the end because it's going to ask you a question. So a father and a son were involved in a car accident in which the father was killed and the son was seriously injured. The father was pronounced dead at the scene of the accident, and his body was taken to the local morgue. The son was taken by ambulance to a nearby hospital and was immediately wheeled into the emergency room, operating room. A surgeon was called. Upon arrival, seeing the patient, the attending surgeon exclaimed, "Oh my God, it's my son. Can you explain who this doctor is?"
Mother.
It's his mother, right? For many of you, may or may not thought like, I have no idea, and that in itself is a bias, right? Because women can be doctors, and probably as I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, that particular passage could be also his other father. Absolutely, Adam. But in that situation, those weren't readily apparent, right? So we had biases that women couldn't do these things. I have one more story before we get back to the curriculum here, and that the Boston Pops Orchestra back in the 40s and 50s had almost all men in the orchestra because it was widely thought that men were better musicians than women, right? So I believe in the late 50s or early 60s, they started doing open tryouts to where they would do a blind audition to where they would pull a curtain across to where the potential band or orchestra member would play, and nothing changed. And the reason nothing changed is that as women back in those days, when they were interviewing for a position like an orchestra member, would wear high heels. And so even though there was a curtain that was draped across to where the person was, all the way across the stage and where they were auditioning, they could hear the clickety clack of heels on the stage floor. Once you put a carpet down and there was total anonymity on who could try out, the symphony started hiring more women to the point where it almost was 50-50. So that bias, even when people are judging and doing auditions, and the widely thought that men were better musicians than women, was totally debunked by holding open tryouts and taking away a lot of the tells about who actually was auditioning. So again, bias are all over the place, and we, and I'm talking about everybody in the room today, have to be really careful on, the types of biases that we currently have. So some of the biases that are out there, the gender bias, we've talked about that already with that, when somebody put that in the chat box. But if a manager is biased in favor of men, they might defer to male opinions over women. Not saying that happens here, but it could happen. An example could be, I know that when somebody comes to the house and we're doing a repair or remodel, maybe we're redoing a bathroom or we're putting an addition on, the builder usually talks to me. And I'm here to tell you, I don't make any of those decisions in this household. So he or she should be talking to my wife, because she's going to make the majority of decisions on how that particular new room, new addition, new basement area is going to look. Okay, so again, it's just that bias that particular builder has, that the man of the house makes those decisions, and it might not be as true as it once was. Again, gender bias for a manager could be give men preference when assigning tasks, or give them more strenuous tasks, and then assign caretaking tasks such as setting out snacks for evening meetings, and let women do those because they are more equipped. I'm not sure what the thinking is behind that. But again, those are some of the biases that can happen, especially with some of the larger scale. May not promote a new mother, right? Because in the back of their mind, they're thinking, well, maybe this mom's not going to have enough time to do the things that she do. She just has a newborn, and I'm going to make that decision for her, that type of thing. So again, just some things to think about as far as gender bias. Anything else that anyone wants to add to that? Hearing none, let's move on to another type of bias, bias called beauty bias. Anybody want to take a stab at what beauty bias would mean?
Their appearance.
Their appearance, right? Decisions are made because somebody might be, in their eyes, more attractive than somebody else, right? Could be in forms of conclusions or opinions based on the appearance. Might favor certain employees for certain jobs and tasks, promotions, and that kind of stuff. So if a manager has to choose between two candidates, the beauty bias might prompt them to choose the more attractive person, even if they're less qualified. In history, our presidential elections, typically, not always, but most of the time, the taller candidate usually has gotten the most votes. So the one that's taller potentially more attractive because of that tallness seems to get the nod. Okay. How about one called conformity bias? Conformity. Who wants to take a stab at that?
And they're walking around not.
Is it like if somebody agrees with what somebody else is saying, they're going to be more apt to like want to choose them? And
Correct, Jamie, you're exactly right. It's more of a group, and it's stronger with a group, but it could work with an individual too. So it's really if I got my own opinions and they run in conflict with yours or a group of yours, I might just agree with you because I want to just be able to be looked at somebody to get along or that's a friendly person. So I would keep my opinions to myself so that I could just blend in with the crowd. So again, it's that conformity that, oh, the group's going that way, therefore I must be either wrong or maybe my opinion shouldn't be known, and I'm just going to go along with the group as opposed to speaking up and letting my opinions be known. So that's called conformity. We conform to that of the group, the larger entity, that type of thing. Got two more for you. So affinity bias. Anybody want to try to take a stab at affinity bias? So this bias really occurs when someone potentially likes someone because they share similarities. Maybe they went to the same school, they have the same interests or hobbies. So again, for instance, a male manager may choose another male manager for a position may choose another male for a position simply because he went to the same college and is pursuing a role that manager held at that age. So again, trying to take that out of it is difficult. It really is difficult. But again, some of these biases kind of leak in. And the last one we'll talk about is not conformity, but confirmation bias. So anybody want to try to take a stab or try to define what confirmation bias means? So confirmation bias occurs in two stages. First, you form an initial opinion about a person, and then what happens, and a lot of times it's unconscious, because that's what we call unconscious bias, is that your brain starts searching for evidence to support your judgment or your belief in this person. So maybe, they might not be as qualified as the next person, but because you form that initial opinion, now you look for just the positive things to support your opinion. Okay, so we know that marketing departments are particularly prone to confirmation bias. It says, imagine that one of your employees has a gut feeling that customers want a specific new product. Instead of looking at the market research data objectively, which shows that customers actually want a new feature added to an existing product, the employee gives into confirmation bias and cherry picks the data points that support their idea. And we know data can be made to justify and back up anything that we want. So we have to be somewhat careful. So overall, there's many other forms of biases, but really want to make you guys aware of the types of biases that are out there. And listen, I know that many people. So I think that I'm totally fair. I treat everybody the same. I'm just here to tell you that it does creep in there, and sometimes without you even knowing it. I do listen to a lot of podcasts, and for many of you may not be interested in the National Basketball Association or refereeing overall, but what they did find in many different sports, refereeing, is that there are biases even for umpires and referees and officials in sports. In one situation, referees were making more calls for the home team because of the crowd and the momentum and that type of thing. And they've done a great job of training referees on that as well. So, so again, trying to make sure that it's fair for everybody. And even in some cases, they would be more lenient or more in favor of the stars of the team than they were on the regular players of the team. Because again, the stars, everybody knew them. They always got the calls. And again, you're not seeing as much of that. It might seem that way, but referees, officials, they're all getting better because they're getting trained on their unconscious bias. They didn't know they were doing it, but now they're being it's being brought up. They're being shown the statistics, and it's working out. So again, a lot of bias out there going forward. Anybody have anything else that they'd like to share on bias, unconscious bias, that type of thing?
Yeah, thinking through bias, I listened to there was the one video I had time to listen to before this on this subject. And while I think there are some excellent points, not all biases are inappropriate. For example, if you have a position that the primary job requirement for that individual is going to be to regularly lift materials that weigh in excess of 200 pounds. You're not going to hire a 4'10" petite female for that role. It's an appropriate bias. You're going to look for somebody that has the physical characteristics that can do that. So being aware of biases, I think are good, but there are appropriate biases just that are based on factual information.
No, and who's speaking, by the way?
I'm Chris Healy.
You can wait.
Hey, Chris, yeah, absolutely great point. That should be, in the position description anyway. And to me, that's less of a bias and more of a, here's what you need to do, here's the skills and things that you need to do the job. But you're exactly right. So, you wouldn't want somebody that you're setting them up to fail, because that is an important part of the job. But listen, being a business coach, I know what's happened in the past is that because somebody can't perform certain jobs that the position needs, we start taking away those positions until that person is, really only has one or two tasks that they're doing. So to run a business, to be a manager, to make sure that you're running your culture the way you should be, you have to hire appropriately too. And that should be handled in your position description. And these are the duties that you will need to perform to do your job. And you need to be able to interview and hold people accountable for that. And Adam says in some situations, he's got two of them here. I do think that sometimes though job postings have bias built. Absolutely. So you have to screen out for the job postings as well, the position descriptions. If you find yourself on the interviewing side of that, you may need to challenge, why something like that is in the position description. Again, tactfully, because again, you may want that position that you're interviewing for, but just trying to say, what would make somebody put that in a position description, or even in a promotion where you're working at a place and the next position needs whatever the case is. And listen, some of these position descriptions may have not been updated for 20, 25 years. So again, it's never a bad thing to kind of question, hey, why would this be in here for this particular position, and make sure they have a solid foundation of why that particular reason is. And then the other thing that Adam has in there is oftentimes education requirements that aren't necessary, right? I'll tell you, there's a lot of companies that say that you need a college education. And I'm just here to tell you, I've seen so many people that are super successful without that the skill that they have didn't come from college, or there's no way they would have honed it better than in college. So again, whatever that education level is, it might be unnecessary for that. But I also think that there's some reasons that they do put in there. So again, another good reason is to question why that's particular situations available. Whether you are writing position description, you are using the position description, or you're interviewing to get that position description. Anything else? Was there anything else anybody wanted to share on any type of stereotypes that you yourself have been a part of, or that you've seen somebody else be a part of that you want to share for the group that we may not have touched on? Nothing there?
I've seen in hospitality, the fact that maybe being of a certain family or knowing specific people is a bias. And I just want to throw that one out there.
No, that's a great one, and I think it can run two ways, right? Is that I've worked with a lot of companies that have family in the business, whether hospitality or not, and really it runs two ways. And this is something we're always going to talk about in this class, is that people are watching, right? So if you have family members employed in the business and they get promotions, and you scratch your head going, I've done everything, or somebody's done everything and they should have gotten that promotion, and a family member, that's not creating a good culture. Why? So we have to be careful of that. But I also have had some situations to where business owners are tougher on their family members, and sometimes it works against the family member. I know a lot of business owners won't even hire family members until they've worked someplace else because they want them to know that it's not going to be all flowers and roses when you get employed by the company. So you're exactly right when you say that as far as family, it works, and people pull people based on their relationships, and family relationships are a very strong one, that type of thing. And then Adam shares that language barriers, right? That sometimes people think that because somebody doesn't speak language fluently, that they don't know as much. And I'm, again, great point here is that I was just down in a potential client's place down in Chicago on Wednesday or Friday last week, and their top person doesn't speak the greatest English. He's from Mexico and he has broken English, but he's one of the best welders you've ever seen. So again, he's very, very good at what he does. And so don't underestimate him, or don't ever say that I don't think that he can get this particular thing done, because he's created some beautiful works of art and parts by what he can do. So great add there, Adam. Appreciate that. Anybody else? Stereotypes that we may have missed that you guys have either experienced yourself or have seen others?
I guess I have one more.
Go ahead.
We had a couple of years ago, we had a group that rented a room here in the Dow Hotel or the conference center so that they could do interviews for potential staff. It was a new startup business in the community.
Okay.
And a young lady came in and was interviewed and left, and she did not get the position for which she was applying. And I helped her at the front of the hotel prior to her leaving. We were conversing and she was very upset and couldn't understand why she hadn't gotten the position. She was highly qualified and was quite upset and disappointed, but was accusing them of having biases. Well, it was a position where she would have been very forward facing with guests. She had tattoos from head to bottom. She had multiple piercings all over her face, her ears. And while she was very bright, I thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with her. She wouldn't have been the appropriate candidate for a forward facing position for a company such as the one that was hiring. It wouldn't have reflected the values of that particular company. And so that was a bias that, yes, it was there. Could she have been qualified in many ways? Potentially. I didn't know her personally, but I didn't see any reason from our conversation why she wouldn't have been. And yet she wasn't the appropriate fit. And was she not hired because of a bias? Probably.
Absolutely. Who is this again?
Chris Healy.
Yeah, Chris, thanks. No, you're exactly right. That's a tough one, right? Because, man, you especially for customer facing, you want the best, opportunity as guests come in to feel comfortable and that type of thing. And so you're actually you've got two things here: the bias that potentially you're not hiring that person because of how they appear, tattoos and that type of thing. But you're also thinking of the biases of your own clients or potential clients as they walk in the door, knowing that this is the area. And it certainly can depend on the area of where your business is located, but it could certainly depend on the area and the clientele that you're going to serve. So you have to make sometimes those biased, unemotional decisions that, you're in business obviously to raise profit, revenue, and provide a great place for people to work. And so, again, if you're not going to attract those types of clients because of potentially somebody turning clients off, and again, this woman might have been a great woman, great person, that type of stuff. But that initial time that they get to see that person, especially when you're customer facing, those are difficult decisions. So thank you for sharing some of that. Anybody else before we move on? Okay, I'm going to share my screen again, get back to the presentation here. Okay. So we talked a little bit about, not of biases that we have, but we have to also understand that we need to deal with that bias. So maybe we're getting training, maybe you have gotten training, or maybe you will get training. And then not only our bias, but others' bias as well, because you might, just like many of the people that have shared, we can see that, right? We can see that around there, and sometimes we just need to be made aware of that, because again, that's why they call it unconscious bias. Once we are made aware of it, can we manage it? Is that something that we need follow-up training, follow-up coaching on? Because we were made aware of it, but yet we slip back into old habits, and that can be an issue as well. And then trying to manage those guest interactions, trying to be as open-minded and not having that unconscious bias, right? But listen, it's not going to happen overnight to where you're going to snap out of, having those biases that you've grown up with. But over time, the best part here is that if you can catch yourself either in the middle of that situation going, I think that I've always thought that, or right after, or even right before. When I'm coaching my clients, one of the best things they can tell me is that, Tom, I remembered what you said, and I was in this conversation, and I stopped myself, and I did something different, or at least stopped myself. That's, to me, is a win. So when we start recognizing that we're in a situation to where it could be a bias or an unconscious bias, I think that's a win there. Once we understand that and we're catching ourselves, then we can go to work on it going forward. So it's not only managing the guest interactions, but also the employee interactions as well. And really, when we start to get into crisis management, where all kinds of things are happening around us, emergencies, and we have to have a level, cool head and make good decisions, good unbiased decisions on certain things. And again, trying to maintain that coolness, make sure you're maintaining your poise. Anything else before we move on? Excellent. Some of the sources of bias. So where does a lot of we've already talked about that piece. Where do we get our biases from, do you think, when we're growing up or when we're in the workforce? Where do we get most of that stuff?
Parents.
Parents are a good one, right? Absolutely, because we're probably got a lot of their unconscious bias. Certainly
Siblings.
Say again?
Siblings.
Siblings, right? You all seem to be talking the same language, especially when you're growing up. Some comments, our friends and environments, the way we were raised. Absolutely, right? It's just everybody else is thinking the same way or not thinking the same way or just making assumptions based on, because that's what our group of friends did, right? So again, trying to understand some of those sources will probably help us to try to unlearn those. Another comment is media, movies, TV, absolutely, right? We're making those types of those judgments because of what we've learned from the TV and the things that we watch growing up. Excellent job. So that being said, how do you feel? How to feel about your unconscious bias? Who wants to share? Do you feel that you're pretty open-minded, that you kind of weigh each situation different, or do you feel that until we start talking about it today, it's not something you really thought about?
I want to share. I just think that for unconscious bias, we need to be proactive in bringing it to our own consciousness so that we're aware of it, so that we can navigate it, manage it, what have you.
So and who was this?
Kristen Fox.
Thank you, Chrissy. Yeah, I think that's where it starts, right? But until somebody tells you about it, I mean, this hit me like a ton of bricks. It's like I thought I was pretty open-minded about and giving everybody a fair shot, regardless of anything. But this when I first learned about this about 15 years ago, it blew me away. It's like, man, Tom, why haven't I thought about this before? Why hadn't I had anybody talk to me about this before? And then we started delving into some of the trainings on this and go, boy, it can really affect certain things and certain decisions. And again, I was a manager for 15 years, and I would look back at my decisions and hiring people and terminating people. Was there anything that I had that I should be ashamed about, or something that I would have loved to go back and do? I didn't have too many of those, but again, it just starts to get you thinking, is that if you now know about this, how can we get better at it, and that type of thing. So we know about the golden rule. Everybody probably knows about that. Do we know what the platinum rule is?
Treat others the way you want to be treated.
Say that one more time so I get it straight.
Treat others the way you want to be treated.
Actually, that's the golden rule. The platinum rule is this: treat other people the way they want to be treated. Right? So the golden rule is treat people the way you want to be treated, but the platinum rule, especially in hospitality, is taking it one step further. Now, a lot of times that's difficult because as clients and customers come in to your facility, how do you know, right? So we have to start making judgments or potential biases based on what they look like, how they talk, asking questions, getting a profile. Maybe you guys there at the hotel, maybe you have some type of a profile of guests, those types of things. Yeah, it starts to become part of your culture and that type of thing. So any thoughts here? Any other thoughts here?
I do think this one can raise some red flags. It certainly does for me in certain areas. And I can
Give me
give,
an example.
sure. Thank you. So I have a son who works in hospitality slash safety type backgrounds. And he works with a school, and they have students that think they're cats and want cat litter in the bathroom. So the department that he works with is to kind of assist and accommodate some of the needs, et cetera. Anyway, the long and the short of it is there are people, and I'm one of them, that don't think it's appropriate to accommodate every desire if it doesn't make environmental sense, if it doesn't make moral sense. And just because somebody wants to be treated a certain way doesn't mean that it's appropriate. So in hospitality, that can look really different because we certainly want to be hospitable. We want to put other people's needs before our own. We want to sacrifice in such a way that treats them with kindness and respect. And all of those things have to be at the top of our desire, but it doesn't mean that every desire that somebody has is appropriate. And just because they want to be treated a particular way, it may not be appropriate for that environment. I gave a really extreme example, but those are things, I think, depending upon the environment where you work, the morals of the place of employment, the values of where you are, those things may look a little different from place to place.
Right on the button. So you have certain, you have your playbook, right? You have your employee handbook, you have your processes and procedures of your facilities, and I'm not going to get in the way of those. And so you're exactly right. There are lines that you cannot cross, or there's lines that you choose not to cross as an owner, as a manager, as an employee, and those you have to know what those are, right? Because you're exactly right. Probably one of the worst, and I remember I've been in sales for over 30 years. One of the worst sayings of all time is the customer's always right. Right? So that gets into a situation, right? And I think the second rule was if the customer is wrong, go back to rule number 1. But I will tell you, there are certain things that, and there's tactful ways to push back, and there's tactful ways to handle that. But you make a great point, is that you need to treat other people the way they want to treat it. And this probably should be caveated based on your own rules of engagement of your facility or your practice or your service or whatever you do. So we have our own rules that we have to abide by for basic employment and for structure of the business and to be successful in business. And so you have to understand what those are and apologize to the client if you can't do that, because that's really against the policies that we have here, regardless. So you bring up a good point that this isn't carte blanche. This isn't totally open. So I'm glad you brought that up. Any other thoughts, questions, or comments on that? Okay, we'll keep moving on then. So this is kind of a question we've already. Have you personally dealt with a guest or employee that you've noticed some unconscious bias that they've had? And then if you did, how did you deal with the situation? as a manager, did you have to coach them? As a peer employee, did you kind of pull them aside and said, hey, I noticed you did this. Does anybody want to share any situations? Okay, I'll move on. So when we do have that conflict, right? Just 3 different words: stop, look, and listen, right? We want to stop it and kind of focus on the issue. If you've noticed it, maybe the first time you let it go, but the second or third time now it starts to become an issue. You've seen how maybe different employees react to that person. Maybe you've seen how clients or customers have reacted to that person. So we may need to stop, especially if you're a manager, put on your coaching hat and say, you know what, just need to have to pull them aside into an area that, nobody else can hear and kind of focus on the issue. Certainly if it's out on the, whether it's with a client, you want to look for indicators for any escalation that somebody else didn't notice it, that, wow, we need to nip this in the bud and make sure that we do that. And then violation of any personal space. If you do make a comment with somebody that they could get upset. So again, that's why we don't want to kind of do this in public. If we can pull them aside, talk to them in private, that type of thing, that could stop any type of escalation if somebody felt that you're violating or you offended them in any way, type of thing. Questions, comments here? And then we have a thing called the bystander effect. When people are one-on-one, they seem to help more. But when people are more, when we're in big groups, we don't necessarily, and I know this is painting with a broad brush here, most people are more likely to offer help to a victim when others are not present. But when others are watching, it seems that the victim doesn't get as much help because that person that would normally do it when they're one-on-one doesn't want the scorn or the judgment of the group behind them. Any thoughts, questions, comments on that? Okay. So when we're and I know not everybody's in here as a manager, but someday you might be. So a manager's role in creating a welcome environment for all, right? So when we're talking about a manager, and really, there's no one that sets out to be a manager and doesn't do these things, but this is kind of a bullet list of things that they want to try to do as new manager, a veteran manager, regardless. And that is, they want fairness and consistency through all your actions. Why? Because as we said before, people are watching. If your employees or your peers notice that you're using inconsistent or unfair type of tactics to get people in certain spots or give them certain jobs, that type of thing, then it's not going to take long at all for you to be labeled some of the negative words that we did in the first class last week. So again, trying to be fair and consistent throughout our actions. One of the things, especially when you've got a busy or hectic day and things seem to be crashing around you, is we want managers' role to be that person of calmness, right? That if we've got an issue that that it's going to be handled properly, you're going to probably be on the front end of that, and you're going to try to, through your calmness, de-escalate anything that could potentially blow up to where emotions run high and that type of thing, whether it's employee on employee or customer on employee or even between customers, that type of thing. So being able to handle things with an air of calmness, I think, is extremely important. A big thing, try to avoid reacting, right? You might hear the most outlandish thing, but it kind of feeds back into calmness. If you can avoid reacting through facial expressions or gasping or even getting angry or emotional yourself, that to me is extremely important because, again, people are watching how you react, how you're going to handle the situation going forward. And then using that little formula, right? Take the time to stop, look, and even listen. We know a story has 3 sides, right? The one person's side, the other person's side, and the actual truth. So again, trying to make, judgments and decisions about what's going on. It does take a little bit of time, that type of thing. And in times you may have to say, you know what, give me a second, let me go somewhere to where I can rationally calm down and think about these types of things. it's important. And then your conflict resolution will start to kick in, right? What's the best decision for this situation right here? Sometimes you got to make quicker decisions than you would like, but if you can, take some time to think about the fairness and consistency of the decision or the resolution that you're going to put on the table. Because again, you may set precedent with what you're going to set on the table. So again, not all decisions need to be made right away. Take some time, make sure that you're weighing all your options going forward, and use these as teachable moments. That maybe somebody has made a mistake, somebody had said something or offended somebody. Is this a time that you can take somebody aside and use that time as a teachable moment, a coachable moment for somebody? Questions, comments here?
I would just say the importance of taking time. I think if you're trying to hear out two sides and you make a decision right away, sometimes you need to sleep on it.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah, if you don't have to make that decision right away, I would recommend taking some time, because again, it's more than just that decision. How will it affect things going forward? I sit on the zoning board of appeals in my own township, and that's the number one thing we talk about, is that there's rules in place, there's things that are placed, and if somebody wants to make an adjustment, something that's out of the ordinary, a decision that we would have to go against the ruling of the planning board is that you're going to start creating precedent. And then if there's a bunch of situations in the township now, you might have a boardroom full of people going, you wouldn't let me do it, or you let so-and-so do it, so now you're going to let me. So that taking that time, and even if it's overnight, if you can do that, I would suggest do that, because you just need to have a well thought out decision. Great point. Anybody else? Excellent, guys. Thanks for feeding back on that stuff. So your job as a manager, first and foremost, am I being fair, right? Am I treating everyone the way they would like to be treated? Again, up to a certain point within your guidelines of your organization. Your job of, treating everybody fairly and consistently. Certainly want to build that safe and welcoming atmosphere. Tough to have employees that are, have anxiety about coming into work because the culture is not good, the atmosphere is not good. They feel there's a touch of bullying, somebody that's a bully there, or they're getting harassed in one way or another, or they just don't think they're treated fairly, right? So again, building that safe, welcoming atmosphere. And it's not do as I say, not as I do. You need to model your appropriate behavior, right? People are watching you. You want to make sure you're a good role model for everything there. And this is a tough one sometimes. We get a chuckle sometimes. Somebody says a certain joke or makes fun of somebody. We need to shut down any inappropriate behavior, because again, people are watching. And if that's okay here, then why wouldn't it be okay 2 weeks from now in a different place? So you got to make sure that if somebody tells a joke that's not appropriate, or says something that might be construed as, we're just playing around, but yet it might be worse than that if somebody overheard it. We need to shut that down. It's difficult. I'm not here to say that it's not, but we need to shut down that as inappropriate behavior, because again, it could escalate very quickly. See it all the time. People get together in some type of friendly banter. It turns into more of a sexual nature, or more of a cutting down somebody nature, bullying nature. We do need to shut that down. It's not appropriate. Now, what they do outside of work, to a certain extent, you don't have any say in that. But again, within your four walls, and when they're on, when they're on the grounds, or when they're representing the company or the situation, then you need to shut that down. Questions, comments here?
I'd just say, since we work in hospitality, we also have to think about the guest and having those conversations behind closed doors, not in the public.
Totally right.
Totally
right. And so that's a nice segue. Right. So when we are out with guests, right, and I know it's probably happened in most hospitality situations, but the rule is, let's take things behind closed doors. Try to be as unemotional about something that's happened, and dressing down an employee, a peer, or even yelling back at a manager. I mean, these things that you are doing would be in front of a guest, and we have to be very mindful about what that looks like. So proactive by dealing with issues either before they become too big. So if you know there's something stirring that could potentially be something that somebody, is on somebody's nerves and they react, boy, it's one thing to do it, behind closed doors, but by doing it in front of guests, totally looks different and really can cause other issues, that type of thing. So we know we can't control the guests, or we can't control employees either, right? But we can't control the guests, what they say, what they do, but we can control the environment. So we want to make sure that if a guest is acting irrationally, and sometimes that happens when and if you serve drinks, but again, sometimes not. They've had a bad day, somebody teased them off, they get upset, they walk in upset. We want to make sure that we handle that for other guests that are nearby, as well as having the backs of our own employees going forward, right? And some of this can happen by just training on your own core values of your organization, helping employees understand what those are and make sure that we're training on those, hiring on those for sure, but also training on those and making sure they understand completely what those are, so that they can practice those in their day-to-day activities. So we know that not everybody's created the same, right? Some employees are more equipped to handle situations than others. It's just part of the deal. You grow up, you have different movies that you've watched, and I say movies, the movies in your head as far as experiences. And so some of them are very equipped to handle some situations and some are not. So that's where some additional trainings need to take place, role playing, that type of thing, so that we can be as prepared as we can be for those situations that may arise. And then it goes back to biases as well, right? Make sure they are aware of their own biases. And that's why we may need to pull somebody aside and say, hey, saw you were doing or saying something that maybe you're not aware of, and that type of thing. Now, we certainly run the risk of offending somebody or saying, stay out of my business, that type of thing. But maybe it's a situation where you can get a manager involved, that type of thing. But again, trying to help so that we have a better culture and a better environment. And then, maybe it gets out of hand. Situation gets out of hand. Do we know when to go grab our manager? At what points do we need to come grab a manager? There's certain things that we can do as wait staff, as cooks, as back the house people, but do you know when enough's enough and you need to make sure that a manager is involved? So managers, make sure that you're at least having those conversations. At what point? And some of it may be gray, subjective for sure, but role plays here certainly help in the situation. And then certainly there's hot spots in organizations in hospitality, such as we know that when alcohol is flowing, these situations tend to get more intense. So make sure that we know what hot spots in your operation that some of the stuff could be more prevalent than others. Questions, comments, concerns here, thoughts that you need to share. Man, you guys are easy. Or just shy, maybe. Employees, right? We want to make sure that the employees have a situation to where they feel safe calling out problems. It is difficult. Being an owner, manager, supervisor, whatever, and problems have existed for a while, and people know about it, but are somewhat reluctant to call them out because they're going to be called a snitch, a snitch, thank you, snitch, somebody that's a tattletale, whatever the case is. We want to create that environment. Again, I'm not saying that every little things need to be called out, but if there are some procedural issues, process issues, really blatant bias issues, bigotry issues. I mean, we have to have a safe place to where you can go to a manager and call that stuff out. What are your thoughts there?
Having a closed door versus an open door, you can
Perfect.
limit those conversations.
Limit how?
shut them out or turn them away or show them they're not welcome. Or
Okay.
just not be open-minded.
Good. Yep. Certainly want to make sure that we have those conversations, and then it's up to that particular employee, right? Because again, they were raised a certain way, but to work here, to have a place of employment here, we have certain things that we have to follow, right? So again, want to make sure we're having those conversations. When we do have an issue, if we do have a blow up, maybe between employees, and maybe it's God forbid, be an employee and a customer, we should probably intervene immediately, right? We should make sure that we get a handle on that, and as calm and as reserved as you can, invite the situation behind closed doors. If it's two employees, absolutely. It gets a little tougher when you've got client versus employee, but you certainly have to get in the middle of that, because again, that just is a very difficult look when you got a client or a employee going at it, or having words, that type of thing. Certainly part of that is to try to de-escalate when you get them behind closed doors, or when you're trying to get the situation handled. De-escalate and make sure that you are listening and not trying to provide answers right away, right? Trying to be non-judgmental. We're not trying to judge or call out anybody until we get all the information. And then, some people have a personal space issue and they want to get in yours, or maybe you want to get in theirs. So again, make sure that your spacing is right. And again, just kind of sets the tone. People can get really emotionally charged if you step into their personal space. So make sure that's happening. And again, the calmness comes back here, right? Don't overreact. Take everything in. Maybe you need to walk away and take some time to make the decision for the situation, or before you come in and talk to employees that have had an emotional blow up or blowout type of thing. And then that's where you have some time for reflection, make some thoughtful decision making before if there is discipline, or if it's a coaching issue, those types of things. And again, making sure we have training for employees to recognize any bias if that's part of the issue. Any other comments, questions, thoughts here?
I had a question in the comments.
Go ahead.
Adam had a question in the comments, I think.
Oh. So yeah, Adam, what do you recommend when employees feel are being unfairly treated, but they aren't? They just don't like to do their job, especially employees that constantly compare themselves to others and incorrectly compare themselves. So just like a 2-year-old child, you have to correct a lot. You have to repeat yourself a lot, right? And then after a while, you have to make a decision on that particular employee. So again, everybody comes from a different situation, right? Different things. You were held to different accountability than the person working right next to you. But here's the position description. Here's the simple things that we ask you to do. And if it comes to, we've had some type of coaching session, we've had some type of a formal formal interaction, whether, and again, I don't know your process formally. And then maybe it gets to, some type of a performance improvement plan, and then potentially it could get down to a termination. But listen, all that's not something that you did as a manager. You've laid out the things that are in a position description. I keep going back to that. They should be there. They should be, talked about every time somebody has an evaluation. Certainly should be talked about when somebody's hired. But here's what it is. This is what your expectations are. You're not living up to expectations. This is what needs to change. And whether you have a 3-strike rule or so many times being written up, I don't know what it is. But again, there's only so much that you can do. And then nobody ever said, I wish I would have held on to that employee longer. They've always said, I wish I would have got rid of that employee because they made my life miserable. So again, what's your process? You've got them in, and I mean, it might even be a situation to where they might do better in a different position. But again, that's way down the road. But and there's modules that will talk about this, but make sure that you're documenting and that type of thing. But sometimes people don't fit into where they are. They thought they were going to, or they did for a while, and now they're bored, or maybe there's been a change in their personal life. And so when it comes to where we've tried over and over and it's time to, part ways, listen, I give them the opportunity to be successful somewhere else because they're probably not going to be successful here. And remember, people are watching. And so how many strikes is this person getting? How many second chances is this person getting? So, Adam, great question. You have to make sure you have a process to deal with that and continually put that back in somebody's in their lap and say, this is a position that this is what we need out of you. This is the expectations. You can't do that, then there's going to be consequences for that. Hopefully that was a good answer on that. Any other comments on that?
Yeah, I would just say as a manager, it's good to have emotional, IQ, emotional intelligence to not let our emotions make the decisions, but make the actual mistakes, focus on or the interaction itself, not let your emotions get the best of you.
Yeah, and that's an important point. I mean, it makes us mad because we see some more in them, or they've come to us the 10th time complaining about the same thing. It is very difficult. I'm not saying any of the stuff that we talk about today is, this should be so easy. It's not, right? We do have to take the emotion out of it. And so take that deep breath. We get that. For those of you that are familiar with the amygdala hijack, that's your reptilian brain. Listen, we're all going to get, teed off. Somebody's going to say something that's going to make us mad, or it's they've said something or did something that makes us mad. We're all going to go down that road. But the key here is how quickly we can recover from that little trigger and get back into where we got both feet on the ground, we're breathing properly, we're calm, and we're not reacting, and try to, like you said, take the emotion out of it. It's not easy. If we do it more and more, it gets better, but we should probably role play with other managers about this because, again, it's difficult. And sometimes I talk about this, with other coaches about my clients. Sometimes I think I want it more than them. I see this person that they could be really good at doing this particular position, yet, it just doesn't happen. And you can only try so many things before there needs to have there needs to be consequences because, again, people are watching. I had my wife works in the Department of Corrections up here in Lansing, and she had a good friend that was just miserable at work. And then she was bouncing around to different jobs, and she finally got into a position that she felt that people cared about her and that she felt that the job that she was doing made a difference. And you know what? She was a completely different employee. That may or may not happen at your place. Maybe there's just not enough opportunity to move. But those are some of the thoughts that you should probably put in there. Would this person be better at a different position? I'm not saying promote them because that people are watching that too. But I'm saying, would they be better in house cleaning? Would they be better if they're in house cleaning? Would they be better, in maintenance? Would they be better in the back of the house? Would they even have an interest in doing something different? That's the conversations you should be having, because if you've talked to them 2 or 3 times, they're not having success at what they're currently doing. But big issue here. We will come and talk about this again when we get down to the management issues and that type of thing. But this is a great point. Not easy. For those that you want to be managers, these are some of the conversations that you're going to have. What else? Anything else? Questions or comments on this? Okay, moving along. Now we got crisis management, an emergency of some type, whether it be medical, fire, somebody's being belligerent, whatever it is, it's a crisis, right? We got crisis management going forward. So I'm not even going to pretend to know what your crisis management policies are in place. We're going to keep this to kind of the 30,000 foot view. Do we know at your location, if we have any type of crisis, do we know who to contact in the event of a crisis? Depending on any level that you're at as an employee, manager, whatever, do you know who to contact in the event of a crisis? So again, these are extremely important things to know going forward. Again, you want to try to follow the employee manual. You usually don't have it in your pocket when a crisis occurs, but you probably should know in general what the employee manual says about these particular things and what the process is. And if you don't, it's never too late to brush up on what your employee manual says, because people took the time to put those things in place and just familiarize yourself with what it says, right? When to call a manager if they're not huge crises, or actually call the police because it's blown out of proportion, that type of thing. And we all know this all happens, right? So when there's an issue, a situation that's going on for any length of time, everybody seems to pull out their phone, right? So what do you do when people are, when you have a crisis? Maybe you have a employee client or customer crisis and somebody's filming you. So how do you handle that? I think somebody had said maybe it's time to pull this behind closed doors, because again, you don't want to have a misstep. It's a crisis. You're trying to be calm when everybody else is losing their mind. You're trying to do the right thing going forward. Anybody been involved in a crisis to where you've had to react? If you have, then certainly would like to hear the situation and potentially solutions that were provided. Nobody?
These happen here.
What kind of crisis would you accept? Are you talking about bias specifically?
Not necessarily bias, but any crisis that you've had to where it's like, oh boy, this is getting out of hand, whether it's between, and maybe you don't want to talk about employee to employee, but anything with customers getting upset to where it's like, oh boy, this is over the top. And it doesn't have to be in this particular organization. It could have been previous situation, and I'd rather you have not say the name if you do want to share. Nothing there? Okay. We have a break. I want you to come back I'm going to give you a 9-minute break. Come back at 2:40. I got 2:31 right now. So come back at 2:40 and then we'll continue on. Thank you.
Thanks.
Aaron, does the print shop close at 4?
I think so. I think it should be done before 4.
Okay. Going to move into the sexual harassment prevention in the hospitality industry. So what we got on tap for this particular area is, what is it? The impact of sexual harassment, recognizing unacceptable conduct, might not be what you think it is, addressing the sexual harassment, employer and manager liability, creating a harassment-free culture, investigating a sexual harassment claim. So what is sexual harassment? Plain and simple, it's unwelcome conduct based on a person's sex, gender identity, or sexual orientation. Okay, this can be physical or verbal. It can also be nonverbal, okay, with body or objects. Should be with touch. I'm thinking not without touch, but again, physical or verbal, and then nonverbal as far as some of the body and touching. Also falls underneath the quid pro quo, this for that. An example, someone in power makes a threat or promise as a condition of employment or favors of employment. And then a hostile environment is a place where unwelcome sexual conduct is so bad or happens so often that a reasonable person would find the place hostile. We missing anything that you guys have there that you would classify as sexual harassment that I might have missed? Okay. Just some things to remember, those that have been sexually harassed before can have physical and emotional issues because of that. Maybe they're more sensitive to it, those types of things. So just things to remember as far as that goes. There is personal and financial cost to victims based on that, maybe that they need therapy and those types of things. So it can be an issue. This always is one that brings up some conversation. The workplace extends beyond your building. So if a bunch of you employees go out and to have a good time, to a movie, dinner, whatever, and something happens, it could fall under sexual harassment for the organization. Thoughts, comments, questions on that?
Even though you're not on the clock, you still represent the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes it very difficult if there's something that went on after you were not on the clock and now you're coming into work into close or even not close proximity, but now there's issues created, right? So when you say that people that work in the same company, organization shouldn't date or shouldn't have relationships, I mean, it does happen, right? But again, this is the kind of sticky situation that we can get into when we don't take the mantra on that it could extend beyond your building. Other thoughts, comments, questions? If you're being sexual harassed, you have a right to report sexual harassment. State law recognizes that your employer cannot retaliate because you have reported a sexual harassment claim or incident. Questions, comments there? So if you are, whether you're a manager or not, ways to help, you certainly want to intervene. If you observe it going on, you certainly want to try to stop it if you can, create a disruption, trying to get whatever's going on to stop, right? So again, trying to make sure that that is de-escalated in some way. And if you can't do either of those, certainly ask for help from a manager, from somebody that's in a maybe a peer that can help you in that situation. So put your answers in the chat box. Here's just a question. Who decides if conduct is unwelcome? The person doing the conduct, the person experiencing the conduct, management, or human resources? What are your thoughts? Or if you want to yell it out, go ahead. Who decides that if conduct is unwelcome?
The person experiencing the conduct.
Perfect. A lot of comments. That's what you're saying. Excellent. Person experiencing the conduct, right? So excellent. Next one. Which behaviors could create a hostile environment? Is it using a sexual, and you can choose more than one, choosing a sexual slur, smiling at someone, telling a sexual joke, leering at someone, sharing a sexual picture, calling someone honey?
All of them but smiling at someone.
Good job. Good job. All but smiling, right? So again, should be able to smile at somebody at work as long as it's not leering. Okay. So we know that safety comes first, right? Making sure that we have issues. Now, again, you need to go to your own process or procedure when it comes to sexual harassment. But this is the 30,000 foot view. What we at HTIM think you should be doing, and that is call the police first and then tell a manager. If you guys have it another way, that's on your organization and your employee handbook and your process. So again, if there's sexual harassment going on, this is what we suggest to do it. We want to make sure we document it as soon as we possibly can, because as time lapse, if you're ever investigated or if you're part of an investigation as a witness, the longer you wait, the more items or events you forget. So write down what, when, how, and any evidence that can come into play. Follow your own procedures to report it to your upper management. Certainly want to tell the manager as part of that. And then steps when an employee reports it. So you're going about your normal business day and an employee stops in and wants to report an incident. We now need to do an investigation. That investigation will include documentation on who you've talked to, what they've said, how many other witnesses there are, and those types of things, including the complainant and the victim. Excuse me, the complainant and the harasser. We certainly need to keep them separate, right? Keep them away from each other. Don't want any continued issues. And then we know that there shouldn't be any employee retaliation for somebody stepping forward and as part of the investigation. And then if we have complaints, this is usually, the first part of this was employee against employee. But what if we have complaints against non-employees and guests? So we may need to report that to the EEOC and then any state or local agencies. But again, you need to consult or make sure that you're following the guidelines of your own organization. And then if you're in a larger organization, which I don't think you guys are part of a union here, but if you are part of a larger organization that has union representation, you may need to go to your union steward and report it there as well. Questions, comments, thoughts here? Okay. Another little quick question. Who may be liable if one employee sexually harasses the other? Only the harasser, only the employer, both the harasser and the employer?
Both.
Excellent. Both, right? So we have to handle these incidences seriously, right? We don't need to brush it off. We don't need to put it on the back burner for another time. This is very important, and it needs to fly up to the highest priority in the inbox. So we want to make sure that we're handling it. So that was when one employee harasses another. Here's a different take on it. Who may be held liable for harassment that occurs in the workplace? The victim, the employer, and the manager. Oops, sorry about that. I went to switch my chat screen and it went off there. Yep. You're exactly right. Wow. Right. C is the answer. Number 3, the employer and the manager. Good job. And then managers. Manager liable when they knew but did not address in a timely manner, right? What should you do if you, as a manager, are personally accused of sexual harassment? Do you confront the employee who made the complaint? Do you remove yourself from the investigation? Do you provide information and documentation when asked? Agree with the schedule change or temporary leave? So it is all but the first one. If you are a manager and you are personally accused, you cannot confront the employee because that would be looked at as retaliation. Who made the complaint? You need to take everything. You need to take yourself out of the investigation. You do need to provide information and documentation, and then agree with the schedule change. So everything except the very first one on the confrontation. Any thoughts, questions, or comments up to here? Come on. Okay, creating a harassment-free culture. What are some of the things that we need to do and concentrate on? Certainly, we want to make sure that have appropriate workplace behaviors. And I know I worked in many hospitality environments and workplaces, and interesting banter, I'll put it that way, takes place. But again, people are watching that. If you look the other way, you're actually condoning it. So appropriate workplace behaviors need to take precedent here, and you need to nip that all in the bud if you certainly see it or hear about it in your workplace. Certainly effective training and complaint procedures. Know what the process is in your own organization. letting employees know that they have your support, right? That that something's going to be done about that situation. As long as it's, and again, the gray area is that you're hoping that it's legitimate, that it's not just an angry situation to where it was fine before, but now somebody's mad and now we've created an issue, but that it's truly a harassment-free culture so that the employees know they have your support. Certainly, if you're serving alcohol, those operations are at a higher risk because it seems that inhibitions are lower. I shouldn't say it seems, that inhibitions are lower and people seem to think that some behavior is appropriate. We want to make sure that we have clear policies that spell that out in the employee handle so they can't come to you and say, I didn't know. So again, having these clear policies, we need to be making sure that it's respectful language that everybody uses. Certainly no, when you're talking about sexual harassment, no touching in the workplace, that type of thing. And then again, no excuses, and we just need to enforce all the policies as they're written. Questions, comments, thoughts here? So if we had to conduct an investigation, if an employee has a complaint, again, you need to go back to your own policies and procedures, but this is what we feel, HTIM feels, is the correct process to do an investigation. So your steps, right, follow the steps to your investigation. Part of that is that we would want, and I'm certainly the victim would want it all confidential. Certainly the person that's been accused wants it all confidential, but I'm just here to tell you that the manager or employee cannot guarantee complete confidentiality, because I'm sure that employee, even though we say, this is a private matter, there's no gag order, there's no legality that employee that's being accused of sexual harassment is probably going to go out and share his situation with others. And then in the investigation, people know that they're going to be involved in some type of investigation. So you need to be somewhat careful when you say to a victim that we can be completely confidential, because at times you just can't be, especially when you're trying to get the sides of the story going forward. But that said, we'll certainly try to protect at the greatest possible extent to make sure that it's confidential on the business side as well. The process, really, you want to have an objective investigator. If this harassed is really good buddies with the person doing the investigation, that's not the way it's supposed to operate, right? You want certainly an objective investigator that can keep the emotions out of it. You want to interview and harasser and witnesses, not all together, obviously. You want to make sure you spend the appropriate time with all. And then certainly any and all documentation that you've acquired needs to be confidential via your HR department or your processes internally. Following the steps, okay, you want to certainly protect those who have complained or expressed intent to complain. Again, this investigation might lead to something that you don't deem as a full-scale sexual harassment. So again, we need to make sure that we're doing everything appropriately to protect both sides, for sure. We protect those who resist sexual advance or protect others, right? So we're certainly protecting everybody from retaliation. If somebody resists sexual advance, we want to make sure that they're all protected under the laws that we have. And those who actually participate in the investigation. If I'm a witness or I've been asked to come in because I saw what was going on, again, there's no retaliation, because that I saw something, I was willing to offer it up, and in that situation, it got somebody else into trouble or got somebody terminated because of that. So again, we want to make sure that those protections are in place going forward. Any questions or comments on this particular area? Anything you're not sure about? Okay. Any questions about today at all, other than if you have issues with your curriculum, moving on to the next one, because right after this class, I'm going to put you all in as attended, except for the one gentleman. So you should be able to continue, but I will make sure that I get a hold of IT to make sure that everybody has access all the way through up to next week, which is going to be class 3. Any questions, comments?
Yeah, I've got a quick question. Do you prefer that we listen to or go through the curriculum prior to each week or
Yes.
following each week?
Prior.
Thank you.
And
Yep.
that'll be helpful in preparing for the exam next Tuesday.
Yes. So if there's an issue, we're going to get to it early next week, so we give you guys time. We'll do a review in class, and then we'll take the exam.
And just a heads up for the exam, that will be, you can meet at the hotel. That's still fine. We're going to walk over to a computer lab so we can all log in and have access to a computer for anyone that doesn't have a laptop. We're going to go to the basement of Lane Hall. There's a computer lab there.
So you're suggesting at least meet in the where we met last week, and then we'll walk over together?
Correct. Yeah. Anyone that doesn't know where the basement of Lane Hall is, we can meet at the Dow Hotel and walk over at 12:50, or 15 minutes till. And then, but yeah, you can use their own laptop. I think someone asked.
Yep, you can use your own laptop. And since somebody said provide information and comply with schedule change. Not sure what that means.
That was from the last question.
So Aaron, the entire class.
Oh,
will
that's
be
from the
in
other one. I'm
Lane.
very sorry. I didn't catch that one. Okay.
Yes, Adam, there are 36 computers there. It's a computer lab. So anyone is welcome to use the computer there during the exam.
But we're not doing the first half in Dow. Everything's going to be down in the computer lab. Yes.
Yep. So at,
Okay.
12:45, we will walk over to Lane Hall. The basement of Lane is the computer lab. So nothing will be at the Dow. We're just, I guess you could say, meeting here, walking over, and then we'll all have access to a computer there.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Does the computer lab have AV capability to present?
Yes.
Excellent. So next week, 1 to 4, meet at the conference center, and then we'll walk over for those of you that don't know. And we will be going over managing the guest experience and then taking the gold service tour exam. Any other questions today? Go ahead.
Tom, next Tuesday we have the college Christmas party. And so it's a busy day. How long do you expect next week to last?
When does it need to be over?
Well, I'm not the one cooking any food, so you're asking the wrong person.
Earlier is certainly better for our kitchen staff.
Yeah, we have an 800 buffet that starts at 10. And then the hors d'oeuvres that start at 6.
So as compressed as we possibly can. Is that the idea?
Yes.
I'll take a look at the curriculum and see what I can do as far as compressing it as much as I can.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Say again?
Thank you for that.
Okay. Anything else today?
Appreciate your time.
Yep. Thanks, folks. Have a good rest of your Tuesday, good rest of your week. Again, text me, call me for any issues with the curriculum so we can get it corrected.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye now.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.